Can you manifest your own destiny, your infinite riches? What do we mean when we say that? How can you change the way you think, not just about wealth, but more importantly, about yourself? Author Pushkar Anand walks us through his own journey, so how he changed his own life, why he thought this was important as a life calling, and maybe most importantly, the tips, the guidelines that he brings you in his new book. He's going to be joining us right here on The Breakfast Club. Yesterday, we all watched excitedly as India made history at Edgbaston. The team sealed a thrilling 336-run victory over England in the second test, and they've now levelled the series 1-1.
And who really is the man of the moment? Shubman Gill. His record-breaking fourth 30 runs, Akashdeep's 10-wicket haul were the key factors that led India to that kind of a dominant win. Let's break down the highlights of this very epic match.
Okay, we'll just bring our audiences some of those numbers in a second, but I do want to ask you, yesterday when everyone was watching and you could see no one, I don't know, I feel like everyone was like, "Arey, batting abhi bhi kyun kar rahe hain? What on earth is going on?" There was some cynicism I was seeing creeping into Indian fans. Let's take our audience very quickly to that package. Then I want to ask you how you thought everything was going to go down, because this has just been so incredible. Take a look.
एडजस्टन के मैदान पर भारतीय टीम ने शानदार और जानदार जीत हासिल की और इस मैच में खेल के तीनों डिपार्टमेंट में भारतीय टीम ने इंग्लैंड को करारी शिकस्त दी। 58 साल के बाद इस एडजस्टन के मैदान पर हम जीत हासिल करने में कामयाब रहे और इस जीत का जश्न अब अगले कई दिनों तक इंग्लैंड में मनता रहेगा, क्योंकि तमाम भारतीय फैंस बड़ी तादाद में जो आज एडजस्टन पहुंचे थे, उन्होंने न सिर्फ इस जीत का दीदार किया बल्कि इस ऐतिहासिक लम्हे का भी वो साक्षी बने। तमाम फैंस से भी बातचीत करेंगे और कुछ फैंस तो ऐसे लगातार हमारे साथ शो पे भी रहते हैं और उनके जो प्रेडिक्शंस है वो बड़े सही साबित हुए। उनका ये कहना था कि भारत यहाँ मैच जीतने जा रहा है। हालांकि जब सुबह आज मैच शुरू होने वाला था तो बारिश हुई और ऐसा लगा मैच ड्रॉ ना हो जाए, लेकिन ऐसा हुआ नहीं। कैसा रहा भैया आज पूरा दिन? मजा आया मैच देख के?
आया जी, हमने तो आपको पहले ही बोल दिया था जी, 58 साल के बाद जीतेगी इंडिया, इधर जीतेगी।
हाँ जी, जीतेगी। और जिस तरह से बॉलिंग हुई है आज के दिन में, आकाशदीप,
सिराज, जडेजा, सभी ने हाथ करा दिया।
तो आप लोगों को तब कब लग गया था कि जब गिल ने 250 किए तब आप टेस्ट मैच जीत रहे हैं? कब लगा आपको ये चीज?
ये हमें तब लगा जब कल पहली पार्टनरशिप हुई तब जी। कल पहली पार्टनरशिप में पता लग गया था जब केएल राहुल खेल रहा था जी, तो जैसे जैसे खेल रहे थे, आ रहे थे, वैसे वैसे उन्होंने स्कोर जो रन है ऐड कर रहे थे, तो इससे इंक्रीज होती रही लीड।
यहाँ पे तमाम लोग एक हवा सी उड़ा रहे थे कि बिना जसप्रीत बुमराह टेस्ट मैच नहीं जीत सकते। क्या जवाब मिल गया उनको?
मेरे को लगता है ये मैच के बाद उनको ये सवाल पूछने नहीं चाहिए। जैसे आकाशदीप ने बॉल डाला है,
बहुत अच्छी बात बोला,
बॉल डाला है, तो उसके बाद ये सवाल पूछने नहीं चाहिए। ऊपर से हाँ, वो कृष्णा का आईपीएल अच्छा गया, लेकिन आपको पता टेस्ट मैच में रेड बॉल में कभी कभी उसका जो नेचुरल लेंथ है वो बैक ऑफ द लेंथ है। यहाँ पे
आप क्रिकेट खेलते हो लग रहा है जी? हाँ जी। बताइए जरा आज का जीत के बारे में, 3 पॉइंट्स क्या अच्छे लगे?
बहुत अच्छे लगे जिस तरीके से
फ्रेम है जी,
जिस तरीके से हमारी भारतीय टीम खेली, बहुत ही मतलब लास्ट में जिस तरीके से हारी थी उस बार लग रहा था कि बहुत सारे कैचेज मिस हो रहे हैं, बहुत सारी फील्डिंग मिसफील्ड कर रहे हैं, बॉलर भी बुमराह नहीं खेल रहे थे इस मैच में, तो लग रहा था कि कैसे हम उनके 20 विकेट्स लेके, लेकिन हमारे बैट आज मुझे लगता है 60 ओवर्स में लास्ट टाइम जो सब लोग विराट कोहली से कंपेयर कर रहे थे कि 60 ओवर्स में हमने मैच जीता, 60 ओवर्स में मैच जीता। आई थिंक शुभम गिल और उसकी टीम ने बहुत अच्छा प्रदर्शन किया आज के मैच में।
जीत का जश्न हम सब यहाँ पर एडजस्टन में मनाएंगे। मेरे ठीक पीछे वो मैदान है जहाँ पर ये इतिहास रचा गया। 1967 में यहाँ पर पहली बार भारत ने टेस्ट मैच खेला था और उसके बाद से बड़े बड़े कप्तान आए हिंदुस्तान के, वो चाहे मंसूर अली खान पटौदी की बात कर लें, सौरव गांगुली हो, विराट हो या MS धोनी हो, सब आए और इस मैदान पर यहाँ से मैच नहीं जीत पाए, लेकिन शुभमन गिल ने वो कर दिखाया। न सिर्फ एज अ कैप्टन बल्कि एज अ बैट्समैन उन्होंने बड़ा इम्पैक्ट छोड़ा और अब हम सब ये उम्मीद कर रहे हैं कि सीरीज़ अब 1-1 की बराबरी पर है। इस भारतीय टीम ने वो कर दिया है जिसको राइट ऑफ किया जा रहा था लीड्स टेस्ट मैच हारने के बाद, लेकिन उन्होंने अच्छा कमबैक किया और अब बारी लॉर्ड्स की लड़ाई की है, जहां पर एक बार फिर हम सब उम्मीद कर रहे हैं कि भारतीय टीम इस विनिंग मोमेंटम को बना के रखेगी और न सिर्फ टेस्ट मैच जीतेगी बल्कि सीरीज जीतने की तरफ भी अपने कदम आगे बढ़ाएगी। तो एडजस्टन से हमारी इस खास पेशकश में फिलहाल इतना ही।
All right, going across to Vineet Ramakrishnan from cricket next. He's going to give us a quick update on all that we've seen the last few hours, and more importantly, Vineet, why the entire nation is so very excited about this huge victory at Edgbaston. You must tell us about the significance of this win, and why is everyone really talking about Shubman Gill?
Well, the significance goes beyond the fact, look, this is the first win for the Indian team without Virat Kohli, Jasprit and Rohit Sharma in over, 20 odd years. Way back it was 2011. So that's a huge uptick for a Team India, young Team India. You talked about Shubman Gill. He was under pressure coming into the series, lost the first test, but look at the way that he has literally led from the front. 269, 161, record breaking. We have talked about it, 430 runs. And it's not just about one individual performance, it's about the team. Test cricket, you win matches not just basis on one individual performance, but you need to have a few more performances, and none better than Akashdeep, who came in as Jasprit Bumrah. And critics like us, we said, this is not a team that is going to take 20 wickets without Jasprit Bumrah, not going to happen. But Akashdeep really, leading from the front there again, 10 wickets, again, a record-breaking one, very emotional one as well. He did talk about it later on, dedicating this victory to his sister who's battling cancer. So all in all, it really was a team effort there. Mohammad Siraj, again, memes going around the fact that when Mohammad Siraj and Jasprit Bumrah play together, Siraj doesn't really fire. But without a Jasprit Bumrah, Siraj steps up with that 6 wicket in the first innings, pretty much set up the tone of this Indian victory. And again, young India, young Shubman Gill has really shown that they are not to be taken lightly, and it sets up pretty well for the third test at Lord's. Jasprit Bumrah would be back, Akashdeep in form, Mohammad Siraj in form, the batters, everybody chipping in. So yeah, you talk about young India, but this is the ruthless India that we saw yesterday.
We'll ask you about what lies in the future in Lords in just a second, Vineet. But Vineet, first take us into the minds of our men. I know that there was a point where everyone was just looking at Shubman Gill still batting and going, why are they still batting? Why haven't they wrapped up the batting? And you could hear even the experts on the field seeming to hint that why was India still there? How did they decide? How did they take that calculation that no, we need to keep going on. This is not the moment to hand it over yet. Take us to their minds.
The mind of that is, you look back at the first test. India put up a target of 400 odd runs, and England, we have to give credit to the way they play, the way they've pretty much took test cricket by the scruff of its neck. So India needed more runs on the board. That was as simple as that. And 600 plus target was something James Anderson, the former England cricketer, said if it is 600 on the board, England would be able to chase that down. But again, when it comes to the execution of it, that's not really the case. It can be all hyperbole. So yeah, from an Indian mindset, they needed to outbat England. And that was the first thing they needed to do. They did that in the first 2 innings, and then hope the bowlers come to the party without a Jasprit Bumrah. And as I said, Akashdeep, Mohammad Siraj, the way they were in-tuned in this game, the pitch was flat. There was nothing for the bowlers there, to be honest, but the way they extracted some movement out of it, their line and length was so perfect there that, they bowled in tandem, and that was the biggest key. So yeah, talking about the target of 600, India needed that buffer to really put England on the back foot, and that's what they did. Akashdeep with the 3 wickets there, Mohammad Siraj with wickets in, Washington Sundar with the crucial wicket of Ben Stokes. So bowlers needed that buffer of 600 odd runs, which Shubman Gill and the other batters also provided. The lower order was a big talking point. The last test, look at the lower order here. 89 from Ravindra Jadeja, handy rocks from Washington Sundar as well. So yeah, that they needed that buffer, and they pretty much shown that, 600, 700, whatever talks that you can talk about, but on the day, on the field, it's about execution. Gill executed, Akashdeep executed, whole Indian team executed. The fielding also was a great uptick from what we saw in the last test as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. And let's not forget, the man we've been talking about, Shubman Gill, he had to meet expectations of the likes of Virat Kohli, and even before that, Sachin Tendulkar. But he's the man who everyone is talking about this morning. In fact, the last few hours have been all about him. Thank you so much, Vineet, for getting us all those details. So yeah, it's been very interesting to see what's happened essentially in the Edgbaston Test cricket, and this win is historic in so many ways because it's come to India after a long time, and Captain Shubman Gill, like we've all been discussing, was the one leading the charge.
At just 26, I think. It's the youngest ever captain to do it.
And let's not forget, there was so much criticism that came in. when the team had officially announced him as the Test cricket captain. So let's not forget that. But yes, he came with twin tons, a historic 430-run match haul. India rewriting this record in history books, and a dominant display by the men in blue. This performance ranks as the second highest aggregate of runs in a single Test match, second only to Graham Gooch's 456 runs. We get you more details in this report. Take a look.
India have smashed records, rewritten history and bossed England in their own backyard. And leading it all, a young captain who's now a certified phenomenon. This wasn't just a win, this was demolition. India sealed their first ever Test victory at Edgbaston, and how? India piled on 587 in the first innings thanks to a batting clinic led by their captain Shubman Gill. Sublime, composed and utterly unstoppable. Gill's tally of 430 runs in the match is now the most by a visiting batter in Test history. He also becomes the first player in Test history to score a double hundred and a 150 in the same match, and the third Indian captain after Gavaskar and Virat Kohli to score twin centuries in a Test. Add to that, he became first Asian captain to score 200 or more in a Sena Test and the highest individual score for India in England. This is now India's biggest Test win away from home ever. And at age 25 years and 301 days, Shubman Gill also becomes the youngest Indian captain to win a Test overseas. And not to forget the all-time India Test record books, which now has a new king at the top. Gill's epic 269 in the first innings puts him at the top of the list for the highest score in Test for an Indian captain. India also became only the sixth team ever to score over 1,000 runs in a Test match. It was not just Gill or Akashdeep, but everyone also put in their able contributions. The records keep tumbling and the benchmarks keep rising, and India under Shubman Gill look like a team writing a new Test legacy. From first-time wins to all-time records, India has stamped their dominance, and it might just be the beginning of a golden era under Captain Gill.
All right, we have our fingers crossed for Lords, but let's move on now to something entirely different. We want to take you to a story that's been right here in Delhi over the last few days. Our air in Delhi is no stranger to headlines, but this time the outcry that we saw over the last few days was about survival on the road. What do we mean? Well, for years, citizens have demanded that their right to breathe, the right to clean air, is very, very important. Courts stepped in, they pushed hard mandates down to cut pollution. That led to the NGT, that's the National Green Tribunal's blanket ban back in 2015. That was upheld by the Supreme Court in 2018. Why are we walking you down history lane? Because since then, diesel vehicles that are over 10 years and petrol vehicles that are over 15 years cannot ply in Delhi. But that has led to a controversial fuel denial policy that we've seen play out across the NCR region on July 1st. Any vehicles that are older than both of these discussed timelines were told no petrol allowed. Petrol pumps were asked to refuse fuel to any kind of overage vehicles.
But here's how the story completely turned around. In just 3 days since the implementation first saw the light of the day, the Delhi government hit the pause button on the order, cited technical flaws in the ANPR cameras, which is the automatic number plate recognition cameras. These were installed in more than 350 fuel stations across the national capital. The other reasons which were cited in announcing the suspension of the installation of the cameras and the simultaneous fuel block was also lack of NCR-wide integration and the risk of middle-class pain without real pollution gains. Because that's the question being asked really. What kind of an impact is this really going to have, and how much of an improvement will the air pollution scenario really see if this implementation were to hold true? But is this the right approach, Toya? That's what's being questioned. Should the focus have instead been on retrofitting vehicles to meet BS6 standards instead of an age-based blanket ban. And what about vehicle fitness? Should age of the vehicle be given more importance than how well maintained or not is the vehicle? Why scrap a car that passes the PUC checks that you and I all have to go through every now and then? And a car that runs perfectly, for that matter, is a question that is being asked by Delhiites.
Right. There are other concerns too. Vehicular emissions, even though significant, aren't Delhi's only source of air pollution. In fact, private vehicles are a small part of the pollution category if you actually break it down and look at it. Vehicular emissions, while significant, aren't Delhi's only source of pollution, and we're going to talk all about that today. Private vehicles are a very, very small part of the polluting category. The 2024 CSE study adds to that complexity. Private cars are just 20% of Delhi's vehicular 2.5 PM emissions, and the bulk, and we're going to be taking a look at all the numbers right here on the show, but the bulk actually comes from two-wheelers, three-wheelers and heavy vehicles.
So let's first go to Anshul with ground reports from across the national capital, where he's also brought to us stories of people who are caught in the middle of this policy, and why really has the national capital seen this kind of a huge full-blown war on the announcement that came in just a few days ago. Take a look at this report.
What are these issues? How have these people been treated? How have their vehicles been seized? We'll speak to the victims themselves and try to understand as to how this entire policy has actually been implemented in the national capital over the last 3 to 4 years. Sir, you have faced issues regarding the same. Your vehicle has also been impounded. What was the entire procedure that was followed, and what eventually happened after that?
नहीं, एक्चुअल में क्या है कि मेरी जो गाड़ी बाउंड की गई, मेरी कंप्लेंट करने के बाद मुझे पता लगा कि किसी स्क्रैपेज एजेंसी ने मेरी गाड़ी को बाउंड किया गया है। अदरवाइज मुझे ये लग रहा था कि मेरी गाड़ी चोरी हुई है, और वो 9 मंथ के बाद मेरे हाथ में सीजर मीमो आता है और मुझे पता लगता है कि मेरी गाड़ी किसी पेनव्यू नाम की स्क्रैपेज एजेंसी है, उसने ये बाउंड किया है। लेकिन जब मैं उनसे जाकर मिलता हूँ तो कोई रिस्पॉन्स नहीं।
कहाँ से उठाई थी आपकी गाड़ी सर?
मेरे घर के बाहर से, पार्किंग से।
अच्छा।
खड़ी हुई गाड़ी वो कैसे प्रदूषण कर रही थी, क्या कर रही थी, मैं एडमिन हो कि मुझे नहीं समझ में आया कि अगर यदि मेरी गाड़ी चल रही होती, आप रोड चल रही होती तो आप पकड़ते, बाउंड करते, लेकिन वो खड़ी हुई गाड़ी इनको प्रदूषण कर रही थी, वो मुझे अभी तक नहीं समझ में आया।
तो आपको उस टाइम कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं दी गई कि गाड़ी आपकी सीज हो रही है?
कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं मिली मुझे। मेरी गाड़ी सीधी चोरी हुई, मैंने सीधा कंप्लेंट लिखवाई। कंप्लेंट लिखवाने के बाद दिल्ली पुलिस आकर अपना एक बयान देती है, वो भी व्हाट्सएप के जरिए, कि आपकी गाड़ी कोई पेनव्यू नाम की कंपनी है, स्क्रैपेज एजेंसी, उसने आपकी गाड़ी बाउंड करी है। तो मैं कहा क्यों करी है? ना उन्होंने मुझे नोटिस दिया ना कुछ दिया।
मेरी गाड़ी एक जून 2023 को उठा ली थी। स्क्रैपर के गुंडे साथ में आए थे, साथ में ऐसे एक थे मीना जी, मेरी गाड़ी उठा के ले गए। तो उसके बाद फिर मैंने 11/6 को 2023 को कोर्ट में पिटीशन डाल दी गाड़ी छोड़ने के लिए। उसमें एक एनजीटी का ऑर्डर है कि अगर गाड़ी को अपने घर में खड़ी करेगा अपनी पार्किंग के अंदर, या दिल्ली से बाहर ले जाएगा, उसी गाड़ी को छोड़ दिया जाए। उसी ऑर्डर के अनुसार मैंने ये पिटीशन डाल दी थी। तो उसके बाद 11 तारीख को मुझे स्टे लग गया, स्क्रैप नहीं की जाएगी मेरी गाड़ी, और 11 अगस्त 2023 को मेरी गाड़ी छोड़ने का ऑर्डर हो गया। तो मैं 16 अगस्त को वो स्पेशल कमिश्नर शहजाद आलम जी के ऑफिस में गया और उनको ये ऑर्डर दिखाया कि मेरी एमएम ने ऑर्डर कर दिया मेरी गाड़ी को छोड़ दिया जाए। तो कमिश्नर साहब बोले कि ये गाड़ी नहीं छोड़ी जाएगी, एमएम का ऑर्डर मैं नहीं मानता।
एमएम का ऑर्डर
मैं एमएम का ऑर्डर नहीं मानता, आप हाई कोर्ट का ऑर्डर लेके आओ तब गाड़ी छूटेगी आपकी। फिर मैंने स्क्रैपर को फ़ोन किया, अगर ये गाड़ी मैं मतलब कि छुड़ाऊँगा तो मुझे आपको भी कुछ पैसे देने पड़ेंगे। स्क्रैपर कहता हाँ देने पड़ेंगे, पॉलिसी के अनुसार मेरे को मेरा पार्किंग चार्ज आपको देना पड़ेगा। तो मैंने कितना पार्किंग चार्ज होगा मुझे बिल बना के दे दीजिए। फिर स्क्रैपर ने मुझे 2 साल का पार्किंग चार्ज का बिल 5,80,000 रुपये का बिल बना के मुझे भेजा, है ना। ये उन्होंने भेजा मुझे, ये बिल भेजा कि अगर आप गाड़ी छुड़ाने आओगे 10,000 तो अलग से भरोगे, और ये 5,80,000 रुपये आपको अलग से देने पड़ेंगे, तभी मैं गाड़ी आपको दूंगा, नहीं तो गाड़ी नहीं सौंपूंगा।
4 साल से यही वाहन के लिए लड़ रहे थे, और मेरी भी एक गाड़ी थी, i10 गाड़ी थी। ज़्यादा मेरी चली नहीं थी, मुझे ज़्यादा यूजेज था नहीं, 10 किलोमीटर डेली मुश्किल से चलती थी। बस वही है, इतना प्रेशराइज इन लोग कर रहे हैं। कभी भी आके 1-2 बार आए भी थे एमसीडी वाले, बट अपोज करने पे उन्हें बैकआउट होना पड़ा। बट इतना प्रेशर, हर बार हम अपनी गाड़ी के पास तो खड़े नहीं रह सकते, कभी ना कभी जाएंगे करेंगे। तो ये बड़ा टॉर्चर वाली बात थी। और वही है कि 10 किलोमीटर चली हुई गाड़ी भी सेम 15 साल चलेगी, और जो 1000 किलोमीटर डेली चलती है ओला उबेर जो भी है कमर्शियल या कुछ भी कोई भी गाड़ी पर्सनल भी चलती है उसे भी एट पार इक्वल। तो लॉ में इक्वालिटी की बात की है, लेकिन इस तरह से अनइक्वल चीज़ों को इक्वालिटी के लेवल पे करने की बात नहीं। तो ये तो लॉ के विरुद्ध ही है।
ब्लैंकेट बैन जो है ये
हाँ, ब्लैंकेट बैन, राइट।
So yeah, very clearly, one common feedback is rather a concern which is being raised by Delhiites is that if we've paid the road tax for 15 long years, why is it that we're only being able to drive our vehicle for less than 10 years in this case, especially in the case of diesel vehicles? That's one thing several vehicle owners have asked. One of the many hit hard by this entire policy, do remember this goes back to 2015, like Toya pointed out, goes back to the NGT order, followed by how the Supreme Court upheld that order in 2018. One of the many left impacted by this policy is Manoj, a Delhi resident who had to sell his diesel car this January itself. And this is, remember, years before its time. In this case, he could have driven much past 10 years. 10 years was the limit, but he decided to sell off his vehicle within 7 years of use. Manoj, धन्यवाद हमारे साथ बात करने के लिए. Very good morning to you, Manoj. सबसे पहले अपनी कहानी के बारे में हमें बताइए. आपने कब गाड़ी खरीदी, कब बेची, क्यों बेची, और ये जो पूरा एक हिस्सा, एक पूरी कहानी जो आपकी इस गाड़ी के साथ रही जब तक आपने उसको बेचा, वो कैसी रही, कितनी तकलीफ आपको उठानी पड़ी इस पूरी पॉलिसी को लेके?
मैम, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल तो मैं बताऊंगा, मैंने 2017 में गाड़ी परचेज की थी. यू हियर मी?
यस, वी कैन हियर यू. यू वर सेइंग 2017 में खरीदी. हाँ,
2017 की इसको परचेज की थी. रेगुलर इसकी सर्विस होती थी, बाय कंपनी थ्रू रेगुलर सर्विस होती रही. सर्विस होने के बाद कोई इसमें गाड़ी में प्रॉब्लम नहीं, कोई इशू नहीं, कोई पोल्यूशन नहीं, बिल्कुल प्रॉपर जो है मेंटेन करके इसको यूज़ करी गई. कंपनी के थ्रू सर्विस कराने का मकसद यही होता है कि प्रॉपर इसकी मेंटेनेंस हो, कोई पोल्यूशन ना हो, गाड़ी में कोई प्रॉब्लम ना हो, एज इट इज़ चलती रहे. इन द मीन टाइम 2010 में ये 10 साल इनके क्लियर हुए, कवर अप हुए. मुझे अल्टीमेटम था कि ठीक है 10 साल ही डीजल गाड़ी दिल्ली में चल सकती है, उसके ऊपर चल नहीं सकती. टैक्स आप 15 साल का भरवा रहे हैं, वो गाड़ी की परमिशन आप दे रहे हैं 10 साल का. तो 10 साल फिर आप जो है गाड़ी चलाओ. बाकी इन द मीन टाइम या तो बाउंड कर दो गाड़ी, या स्क्रैप में डाल दो, 10 साल से ऊपर हो जाए. अगर आपने गाड़ी अपने घर पे खड़ी किया तो पार्किंग चार्जेस भी पे करो उसके, अदरवाइज नहीं तो उसको सेल कर दो. सेल कर दो कहाँ? दिल्ली से बाहर सेल कर दो. पता, दिल्ली से बाहर सेल कर दो. दिल्ली के बाहर ठीक है, पोल्यूशन नहीं है, दिल्ली के अंदर पोल्यूशन है. सिर्फ गाड़ियों की वजह से तो पोल्यूशन नहीं है ना. ये आप पहले लाखों रुपए की गाड़ियाँ मेंटेन कर लो, प्रॉपर टाइम से सर्विसेज करा लो, पोल्यूशन के अंडर कंट्रोल के रहे, ठीक चलती रहे. और जब प्रॉब्लम आए तो गाड़ी कहते हैं ठीक है जी आप गाड़ी जो है 10 साल इसके पूरी हुई, यानी एज के हिसाब से चली है ना. फिर गाड़ियाँ मेंटेनेंस के हिसाब से नहीं चल रही, फिटनेस के हिसाब से नहीं चल रही. आपने गाड़ियाँ बाउंड करनी है गाड़ी. मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि पोल्यूशन अंडर कंट्रोल नहीं होना चाहिए, बिल्कुल होना चाहिए, 100% होना चाहिए. बट कोई सिस्टम होना चाहिए कि आप पहले गाड़ी या सर्विस करा रही हो, गाड़ी की मेंटेनेंस ले रही हो, 2 साल 3 साल बाद उसकी फिटनेस चेक करो, वो स्क्रैप में देने लायक है कि नहीं है, चलने के लायक है कि नहीं. अगर वो चलने के लायक तो उनको परमिशन दीजिए. 6 महीने का, साल का उसको एक टाइम रखिए कि साल ये ठीक चल रही है, अगले साल आने के बाद दोबारा फिटनेस चेक कराइए. गाड़ी ओके है, गाड़ी की फिटनेस ओके है, गाड़ी चलने लायक है तो उसको परमिशन दे दीजिए. अगर नहीं चलने लायक तो स्क्रैप में डाल दीजिए, पाउंड कर लीजिए, कोई बात नहीं.
मनोज जी, हमें ये भी बताइए, आपके अलावा आपने हमें शायद बताया कि आपके परिवार वाले, आपके नेबरहुड में कम्युनिटी वालों को भी ये बहुत अफेक्ट किया है, ये जो नया रूल है.
बिल्कुल इफेक्ट किया मैम. कईयों की तो गाड़ियाँ ऐसी है कि 7 साल की, 5 साल 7 साल 90% जो है दिल्ली में लोग जो है कहते हैं इंस्टॉलमेंट लेके गाड़ी जो है करते हैं. और 90% जो है दिल्ली में लोग सर्विस क्लास लोग हैं. दिल्ली एनसीआर में इतनी उनकी गाड़ियाँ चलती नहीं जितनी खड़ी होती है. 7 साल उन्होंने इंश्योर कहते हैं कि इंस्टॉलमेंट्स भरी, 1 साल और रखी, फिर पता चला 10 साल कम्प्लीट है, उनको सेल करनी पड़ेगी गाड़ी. तो क्या फायदा हो उनके उस चीज़ का. या तो आप 10 साल की अमाउंट लिख रहे हो कि रोड टैक्स आप 15 साल का भर रहे हो, गाड़ियों की परमिशन आप 10 साल की पहले ही 10 साल कर दो, या गाड़ियों की एज बढ़ा दो. आप फिटनेस चेक कीजिए, फिटनेस के अगर फिटनेस गाड़ी चलने लायक है तो उसको परमिशन दीजिए, नहीं कीजिए।
सो आपका पॉइंट है कि
गाड़ियों
बहुत ऐसी चीजें थी और टॉकिंग अबाउट जैसे अभी आपने कहा फिटनेस चेक करवाओ, यू नो दैट्स द बिगेस्ट थिंग जो दिल्लीइट्स ने कहा है कि कोई टेस्टिंग तो करो देखने के लिए, बस कि 10 साल की हो गई दैट्स नॉट इनफ, टेस्ट इफ द कार इज एक्चुअली कॉजिंग पोल्यूशन।
एज आप गाड़ियों को जो है मार्केट में उतार रहे हैं कि एज के हिसाब से उतार रहे हैं, गाड़ियों के चलने के हिसाब से। लाखों करोड़ों रुपए की गाड़ियां हैं, चाहे गाड़ी 5 लाख की हो या 50 लाख की हो, दुख सबको होता है मैडम।
ऑफ कोर्स
कि गाड़ी मेरी इतनी चली नहीं, मुझे गाड़ी इतनी मेरी चली नहीं जिसकी वजह से मुझे उसको
मेड सो मच सेंस। मनोज जी, आपने जो बोला कि कई तो अपना लोन भी नहीं भर पाते हैं जब तक गाड़ी बेचने का समय आ जाता है। सो दैट्स अनदर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट talking point that you've given us. Manoj ji, many thanks for joining us this morning and thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We're also being joined by Professor Nomesh Bolia from IIT Delhi. He's an expert who studied clean air interventions globally. He's been part of several such research campaigns and personally has been invested in this cause. So let's quickly take it across to the professor. Very good morning to you, sir. How do you look at this ongoing debate, and would you want to really pick up from where Manoj left in really saying that it's the fitness of the cars that should come first? That's one concern which has been spoken of by each and every Delhiite.
Correct. Good morning and namaste. Thank you for having me here. First of all, let me congratulate the Delhi government for taking a stand that I think they should have taken much, much earlier. This whole thing about simply taking vehicles away off the roads 15 years or whatever the number is, was bound to have this impact from people. And like our other guest here on the show has already mentioned, it may not really make sense to only go by the number, particularly when the number hasn't really come out of any significant research, right? Because there are no studies that say 15 years is the right number for a country like India. And there are many other aspects of this as well, which we can discuss as we go along in the show. But I agree with him. This 15 years bit is a problem because it has not come out of any research, number one. Number two, air pollution, there are other ways to tackle it, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
And number three, and I think this is an important point, is also about, sanctity of the laws, right? So the Motor Vehicles Act of the country, it talks about a 15 plus 5 years kind of a runway for the vehicles. Now, when our guest would have bought the vehicle, he would have assumed that he can use it for 15 years. Now, you can't bring in a law and apply it retrospectively. For him, it's a retrospective application of the law. I think this is just not done. If at all, research suggests that there is some number of years after which vehicles have to go by, there can be one such argument. We can talk about that. Even then, to my mind, it cannot be applied suddenly without any notice, without any compensation to people who have already bought the vehicle. Maybe it can be applied prospectively, but not retrospectively.
Okay, Professor, we know that you join us not just from IIT, but in particular from a school that researches air pollution and air quality in depth. And I know that your research work in particular has looked at cities like Tokyo, like Beijing, in the last few years and looked at how systematically they have tackled this problem. Professor, almost, every year when this issue comes up, articles are written, op-eds are written by experts, and it feels like there's people talking and maybe we aren't listening, maybe there's a lack of policy work happening. I don't know how you analyze it. But first, just tell us the biggest learnings that you think we still aren't taking when it comes to tackling our air pollution.
So that's a good question. The biggest learning, if I have to summarize in plain language, not really technical, is a mistake that our policymakers often make. Is that they are looking for some magic wand kind of solutions which can be imported from somewhere. What I learned from my study of Beijing and Tokyo, which I also visited, I talked to government officials there, I talked to industry people, I talked to waste managers, is that, although this is not rocket science, the science behind it is fairly well known. One just needs to put together a well-oiled system and implement it effectively. And such a system is very contextual. So we cannot wholesale borrow something from Japan or China or US or Europe. We will have to create our own system. We can take learnings from some of these places. What are these learnings? One, for example, Tokyo, what one can make out, and this is again not technical to begin with, right, is that senior policymakers were very, very seriously invested in this issue. So I'll give you an example. There is the Parliament of Japan in 1972, if I remember correctly, the number could be wrong, it could be 71. was actually called Pollution Parliament. The name itself came to be known as Pollution Parliament because they came up with a series of laws to tackle, acts to tackle air pollution. Right? Fast forward, and then it started with these acts, and then it went forward. Fast forward to 1980s, maybe 90s also. You could see senior policymakers and government officials serious enough that, for example, the mayor of Tokyo would personally go to schools and talk to kids and other relevant people about air pollution and the need to bring certain things about, bring some changes in the lives of people. Another example that I'll talk about. I went to one of their waste management facilities, right? So how things are connected, I'm just trying to give an example of that. It was such a well-managed waste management facility. I felt I'm going to an exhibition hall. It was not waste management. There was no smell. Incarceration was happening. I could not really make out that there is waste all around here. All the city's waste was actually, or a part of the city's waste was coming there. If you would walk in, you would feel you're probably walking into a hotel, right? So waste management also contributes to air pollution. It's well known. And, the Japanese really understood it well. They put it all together, put a system that works. They had proper accountability, an implementation system. And I think those are the kind of things that we need to implement here as well.
But Professor, as you rightly pointed out, the challenges before a Tokyo or a LA, for instance, would be very different from the challenges that India or cities like Delhi continue to face. So in that sense, how do we differentiate between the strategy that can be locally adopted here and to what kind of success rate that strategy can see? Why have we not been able to do it? Why have we not been able to achieve the kind of clean air standards that we've been aiming for the longest time? Because the air quality in Delhi, for instance, has only been deteriorating year after year.
Yeah. So no, that's a great point. I think there are some meta-level understandings that are relevant from Tokyo as well. Right? And those meta-level understandings are what I just talked to you about, right? Which is that senior policymakers have to be seriously invested and one has to come up with one's own solution. You can't simply be hoping for some kind of a magic wand. That's my favorite phrase, right? You can't just hope for that, import it somehow, import some technology from somewhere and hope that it will work. The other meta understanding is that before getting into fancy solutions, such as, we were talking about those large, machines that will somehow take care of pollutants,
rainwater,
right? Or even cloud seeding, those things. Before going to such things, what we like to say as researchers is it's best to fix particulate matter pollutants before they get into the atmosphere. Once they get into the atmosphere, it is very costly, gets messy to really take them out. Now, what are some of those ways which we in our context should be looking at, right? Because you talked about contextually, how is Delhi different? One way in which we are very different from Tokyo, and we will have to find our own solution, and scientifically and technologically the solution already exists, is just plain, dust. Japan doesn't have that. Our tropical nature makes sure that there is dust all around. Good road cleaning, I think, has an important role to play when it comes to particulate matter. This has already been established. There are studies that talk about it and so on and so forth. So how do you make sure that you bring in good mechanical road cleaners maybe and put up a good system so that all Delhi roads are really cleaned effectively and at the frequency at which it is required? That is number one. Number two, which is not right now relevant for Tokyo, maybe it was relevant for Tokyo, LA, Beijing, these cities earlier, is just the sheer congestion that so many of our cities have. Right? And that congestion, as it was pointed out in a recent media article, I think Sunita Narayan from CSE also pointed it out, actually is that, it contributes significantly to the pollution. Why do we have such congestion? There are many, things that one can talk about. One specific example that we've been, talking about in some of our own research, one of my own PhD students has actually worked on, public transport and how it can be more effective, is our parking seems to be messed up. Right, so I live at IIT Delhi, and we need to reach, for example, Chanakyapuri and that area. We need to cross the Ames area, Yusuf Sarai. This area, when long back, I've been here for the last 15 years. Maybe about 10ish years back, the parking there was really messed up, right? And you could see that there was a lot of congestion. That is sort of eased now because there is something. I don't want to get into details. Something that has been done to make sure that the parking is a little smoother. You look at Lutyens Delhi. The reason why it doesn't have congestion is because there is no parking that needs to be done. There are no commercial establishments in that area, right? So much of this congestion comes from, for example, parking. If we can sort that out, I think it will be a big help. How do you sort it out? Well, we can have big parking lots. We can make sure that you really pay what the actual cost is of parking. 20 rupees per hour, I think one has to do a study, but I think might just be too less.
Professor, the other thing that you've talked about that I love is the need for positive incentivizing and de-incentivizing. So, for example, maybe charge people more when they're taking their cars into areas that you want should be less congested. Professor, very quickly, let me ask you, we have the last 2 minutes. If you were given the proverbial magic wand that you keep saying doesn't exist, would you start at road cleaning? Would you start at parking? How would you, what's that first major step you would actually take? If not, the EOL vehicles and what we've seen.
Correct. I would try to make public transport much more attractive, right? Which means, better bus planning, better bus routing, etc., etc. Second thing that I would do is I would make sure that, people who use cars are really paying for the use of those cars. Like you said, if you go into the central business district or areas where there's already enough congestion, you either pay for it or, there is good enough parking charges and things like that. Third that I would do for sure is somehow put in place a task force that creates some kind of an air quality manager for the city with enough powers and enough accountability so that there is one person or one team responsible who you can go to for any kind of air pollution related issues. If we are really serious about it, we'll have to do some such accountability with this.
Okay, so you've given us a long list of to-dos, something that can be implemented in the near future, whether or not that does happen, whether or not there are those who are up for suggestions remains to be seen. But thank you so much, Professor, for sharing all those very important details this morning. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. I'm really hopeful. I think, as I said, as I started off, I think the Delhi government has done a very good thing. By questioning this whole thing and writing back to the concerned people and things like that, I'm hopeful that good things are going to come out.
I hope we see an air quality mayor. I loved, or an air quality manager at least, someone who looks at that. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us. Okay, let's take you with that positive sort of thought and that hope that we actually see that kind of change coming about. Let's head into a quick break. On the other side, what are we taking a look at, Gridspeed?
What we're going to talk about is how there is an attempt being made, at least an attempt being made, to change how we think about wealth. What does being rich mean to you? We'll talk about a very interesting perspective that's come about in terms of a book right after a quick break. Be right back.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Breaking news, BRICS condemns Pahalgam terror attack. And in a statement they say we condemn it in strongest terms, terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. We reaffirm our commitment to combating terrorism in all its forms, including cross-border movement of terrorists. We urge to ensure zero tolerance for terrorism and reject double standards in countering terrorism. We look forward to further deepening counter-terrorism cooperation. So that was the BRICS statement, where very categorically, in a very strong form, they are condemning Pahalgam terror attack. And as they say, I quote, we condemn it in strongest terms, terrorist attacks in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. And they're also saying that they're reaffirming the commitment of the BRICS to combat terrorism in all its forms, including cross-border movement of terrorism. They also say that they urge zero tolerance on terrorism and reject the double standards in countering terrorism. All these points, of course, raised by Prime Minister Modi. He talked about the double standards. He also, of course, spoke about the Pahalgam terror attack and how everyone should come together to actually counter terrorism. Now, we are seeing, of course, that BRICS summit, which is taking place in Brazil, has come out with this statement where they have very strongly condemned the terror attack which happened in Pahalgam. My colleague Akanksha Swaroop is with us on the phone line. Akanksha, tell us the importance about this BRICS statement that has been given and very categorically and in strong words condemned the Pahalgam attack.
Absolutely. It has found a mention, the attack of 22nd April, in which 26 people were killed and many more injured. In fact, more importantly, they have also emphasized the responsibility of states in combating terrorism and global efforts to prevent and counter terrorist threats, including the Charter of the United Nations, in particular, the purposes and principles. They have also talked about how due protocols, international conventions should be followed in addressing such issues. The activities of the BRICS counter-terrorism working group and its 5 subgroups based upon BRICS counter-terrorism strategy has also been talked about in this declaration. They are also talking about deepening further counter-terrorism cooperation and finalizing an adoption of a comprehensive convention.
Welcome back to the Breakfast Club. Let's take you now to Monday's person of interest. He's Cambridge and LSE educated. He's a visionary in human potential. He's also the founder for the Centre for Infinite Riches. Pushkar Anand joins us this morning, and his work sits at the intersection of money, purpose and inner alignment. His latest book is Manifest Your Infinite Riches, and it's already drawn global attention. We'll talk a little bit about what it talks about. Glowing praise coming in from the co-author of Chicken Soup, Jack Canfield. We'll talk a little bit about it.
So yes, he really deep dives into what true wealth is all about. It's not just financial, also emotional, spiritual, and to a great extent, deeply personal. So he's spoken of what money, riches mean to him, what it should mean to the generation going ahead. A framework, he says, can help anyone break free from scarcity thinking and step into abundance. Joining us live on the Breakfast Club, Pushkar Anand, on why mental wealth, I beg your pardon, is mental health, how to align with your dharma, and why manifesting is all about actionable charity. Pushkar, many thanks for joining us this morning. Really looking forward to this chat. And I want to begin by asking you the most basic question I'm sure has been put out to you. What is wealth for you? And how do you define riches as you've gone about in your book?
Well, let's put it this way. Every human being is infinitely rich. I start the book with these words. Yes, you are infinitely rich. You are infinitely rich because you are you. So that potential of foundation is there. When we are able to bring it out and become the person we always meant to be, we as wealthy as it can be, we as rich as it can be, we infinitely rich, and we've manifested those infinite riches.
Okay, so Pushkar, the question to ask next is actually what your story was, but I don't want to do that. I actually want you to first tell us about someone you've walked through these steps with. So walk us through how you've changed any one person's life, and tell us a little bit about how you made them understand your principles, because frankly, unfortunately, in today's day and age, one comes across a lot of books, that promise to raise one's vibrations, to raise one's frequencies, and these ideas have almost got a woo-woo sort of shade to them. So I want to understand how you made someone believe, how you made them believe in the central principles, and how you changed their life.
No, absolutely. I'd love to share an example. There are quite a few in the book, but I'll stick to one which is hugely personal and I think highly transformational, with results which are there for the world to see. So in India, I publish with JACO, which lots of people in India know about. The rest of the world, I didn't go with a huge mega publisher. I went with a mid-sized hybrid publisher because I had a certain feeling in my heart around freedom of how I wanted to get this book out across 50-odd countries in every continent. And I wanted the ability to implement or manifest that freedom, which sometimes gets restricted if you have a mega program with a huge publisher. And as I found this particular publisher, it's called Rowan Vale Books. The very early days, they'd been doing a bit of self-publishing, and they got to a point where they were a pretty well-regarded self-publisher. And I had a conversation with the main promoter the first time. And I said, I'm looking at a classic hybrid model. And she said to me, that's the vision in my heart, in my mind. I want to grow Rowan Vale from a self-publishing firm, a well-reputable one, to a true hybrid publisher and take it global. So I started explaining to her, Kat is her name, Kat Charlton, and I said, Kat, this is how these principles work. We make a vision within ourselves. Let's call it the heart, let's call it the mind, let's call it what we like. We look at it and we work backwards using all of the learnings, methods, techniques that we have. So you go away a couple of days and you think about the vision you have of where you want Rowan Vale to go. Well, she's saying, I wanted to be the leading hybrid publisher in the UK with a significant presence across Australia and the US. And, I'm thinking about other places. So that's how it started. And over the course of the 15 odd months we worked together, that firm grew into a hugely respectable, mid-sized, high-growth hybrid publisher with a presence in every continent today. That firm has metamorphosed from where they were to the vision that Kat had inside of her in this 15 to 18-month period. I cannot think of a bigger, brighter example, except my own, who I've become in the process, to share, because I've seen that company grow step by step. And there's so much of emotional investment from them into my enterprise as it is from mine into theirs.
Pushkar, that's
I
a
hope
lovely,
that gives a bit of perspective around this concept of how something actually unfolded.
Oh yes, absolutely. But what was it like for you personally? The journey that you went through. How is it that from a professional journey, being a 100% corporate person to finally carving this path out for yourself, wherein I do know that you don't like this terminology for yourself, but how have you finally ended up being a life coach of sorts for everyone who's reading your book as we speak?
Yes, it is. It's a 15-year journey. The first time I was ever interviewed before the book came out.
Oh, so that's how long it took for you to come out with the book?
It's a 15-year journey.
Oh, wow.
15-year journey. And the first one who asked me this question was my mentor, Jack Canfield, in his interview. And I said, Jack, I'm going to try to compress a 15-year journey in a few minutes. And that's what I'm going to try to do here. And I hope I succeed again. I had very much of a textbook career. I went to school called Don Bosco in Delhi, and I was a pretty good student by most parameters. And it was a very fixed textbook kind of vision I had for my life. Go to the LSE, go to Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, or Yale, then work in banking and be really senior and do really well. And that it started out there. But around the time we came to the global financial crisis, I had this huge voice inside of me which kept nudging me on. I was working with Citibank in India, and I'd completed the LSE degree. So you've got to apply, you've got to do a one-year MBA at Oxbridge. Come on, get on with it. It's almost as though a force bigger than me took me over. And it wasn't a logical, rational decision to take. But this tug of war between the heart and the brain went on about a year. And then I said, hell with it. I'm going to make the application. Let's see what happens. So we cashed in every penny we have in a Provident Fund those days, and literally every nook and corner of savings, and went into debt of $100,000, wound everything up, first baby in its way, and off we went to Cambridge. And I was, once the adrenaline cooled off, I was petrified and scared that what the bloody hell is going to happen with my life if it doesn't work out. Anyone would be. And I started reading. And I started with this book called Bring Out the Magic in Your Mind. It goes back to the 1960s. English magician Edward de Alcaran, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. And I started looking for that foolproof formula for success. And this interest became a passion. This passion became an obsession. And over the next 15 odd years, I went through some 500 plus books. I went to more than 30 immersive workshops and seminars. I trained one-to-one with my dear teacher, Blaine Bartlett, called him Grandmaster B Square. Was mentored by Jack. And at the end of it, as we got to COVID, the quest within me for looking for that foolproof formula for success out there became finding my purpose from within. which in turn was
Pushkar,
get out there.
Can I ask you? I just wanted to interrupt you because we have our last 2 minutes, and I want to ask you because as all our viewers are watching, and they might want some of those tools for themselves.
Sure.
So beyond manifesting and imagining, which you already talked about, envisioning what one wants, what are the tools to actually actualizing it?
Well, visualize the feeling in your heart. It doesn't matter whether you write down a story, you write down cards, you imagine. Visualize the feeling in your heart that you already are the person you want to become. Feel that you've already become who you want to be. Because the subconscious mind responds to what you think of as true consciously. If you think of as true consciously, you've already become who you want to be. That goes to the subconscious. That is what comes out there because that is the vibrational match. Most people think that they want to become somebody else. No, you assume you already are who you want to be. And that comes out and unfolds. You use the word manifest, unfold, physical experience, result, outcome, whatever you like.
Okay, so Pushkar, before we let you go, you've spoken of what it takes to identify what you truly want. But how easy or difficult is it to walk that path or really implement it in your personal life? Is it that easy as you make it sound?
It is not simple, but it's easy.
Okay.
We've got to rise above what we see out there. And the best example to leave you and all of you is with is Steve Jobs had this concept called the reality distortion field. He'd go and say that this is what needs to be done. People would say, no, it can't be done. He said, no, this is done. Assume it's done. What is needed to get it done? So he was so hyper myopically focused on the fact that this is already there. This is possible. You almost trick yourself into believing what you want is already there. And that's my own journey. Years ago, I couldn't have thought of myself having written a book, giving interviews across the world, but with time it happened. The feeling came from within. I assumed it's already there, and there we are having a conversation early morning.
This is like 50 steps ahead of dress for the job you want. Do you know what I mean? In one, you're just dressing, but in this sense, you're saying believe entirely. Pushkar, thank you so much for joining us here on The Breakfast Club. Thank you for sharing. I hope, it starts off our audience's week on the right note. They take out a little bit of time just to envision who it is that they want to be.
All right, with that, we head into a very quick break. Lots more lined up, lots more interesting conversations and special reports in just a bit. We'll be right back.
This is The Drive.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Breaking news, BRICS condemns Pahalgam terror attack. And in a statement they say we condemn it in strongest terms, terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. We reaffirm our commitment to combating terrorism in all its forms, including cross-border movement of terrorists. We urge to ensure zero tolerance for terrorism and reject double standards in countering terrorism. We look forward to further deepening counter-terrorism cooperation. So that was the BRICS statement, where very categorically, in a very strong form, they are condemning Pahalgam terror attack. And as they say, I quote, we condemn it in strongest terms, terrorist attacks in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. And they're also saying that they're reaffirming the commitment of the BRICS to combat terrorism in all its forms, including cross-border movement of terrorism. They also say that they urge zero tolerance on terrorism and reject the double standards in countering terrorism. All these points, of course, raised by Prime Minister Modi. He talked about the double standards. He also, of course, spoke about the Pahalgam terror attack and how everyone should come together to actually counter terrorism. Now, we are seeing, of course, that BRICS summit, which is taking place in Brazil, has come out with this statement where they have very strongly condemned the terror attack which happened in Pahalgam. My colleague Akanksha Swaroop is with us on the phone line. Akanksha, tell us the importance about this BRICS statement that has been given and very categorically and in strong words condemned the Pahalgam attack.
Absolutely. It has found a mention.
Welcome back to the Breakfast Club. We are not done yet. Let's take a look very quickly at the markets.
So now we bring to you a special section on financial markets powered by Money Control Pro, Money Control's premium destination for investing and business insights. Based on GIFT Nifty data, Indian markets are expected to open flat. US markets, remember, it closed on a positive note in the previous week in anticipation of a positive outcome on trade deals. Asian markets are also trading mixed today, with most indices in negative territory. As for gold and oil, futures are trading low amid caution among investors.
Okay, let's take a look at banking stocks. Now, banking stocks have outperformed the broader stock market in 2025 so far. Banks' credit growth has moderated and now trails deposit growth at the system level. A series of action from the RBI have eased the liquidity situation. Will banking stocks continue to outshine after a sharp fall in rates? That's obviously the big question. And you can log into Money Control Pro to find out more about India's banking sector and various other actionable insights on the market. It's the premier destination for all investing views and financial insights that you're ever going to need, brought to you by Money Control. All right, and with that, we are drawing our show to a close. Remember, you can tell us what you want to see us cover on The Breakfast Club. Just message us, reach out to us on Twitter, on X, at CNN News 18. Of course, tag The Breakfast Club. Tell us what you want to see.
It's going to be Self and Toya every morning sharp at 8. We'll see you tomorrow.
Goodbye.
Thanks for watching.
Brought to you by This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Breaking news, BRICS condemns Pahalgam terror attack, and in a statement they say we condemn it in strongest terms, terrorist attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. We reaffirm our commitment to combating terrorism in all its forms, including cross-border movement of terrorists. We urge to ensure zero tolerance for terrorism and reject double standards in countering terrorism. We look forward to further deepening counter-terrorism cooperation. So that was the BRICS statement, where very categorically, in a very strong form, they are condemning Pahalgam terror attack. And as they say, I quote, we condemn it in strongest terms, terrorist attacks in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. And they're also saying that they're reaffirming the commitment of the BRICS to combat terrorism in all its forms, including cross-border movement of terrorism. They also say that they urge zero tolerance on terrorism and reject the double standards in countering terrorism. All these points, of course, raised by Prime Minister Modi. He talked about the double standards. He also, of course, spoke about the Pahalgam terror attack and how everyone should come together to actually counter terrorism. Now we are seeing, of course, that BRICS summit, which is taking place in Brazil, has come out with this statement where they have very strongly condemned the terror attack which happened in Pahalgam. My colleague Akanksha Swaroop is with us on the phone line. Akanksha, tell us the importance about this BRICS statement that has been given and very categorically and in strong words condemned the Pahalgam attack.
Absolutely. It has found a mention, the attack of 22nd April, in which 26 people were killed and many more injured. In fact, more importantly, they have also emphasized the responsibility of states in combating terrorism and global efforts to prevent and counter terrorist threats, including the Charter of the United Nations, in particular, the purposes and principles. They have also talked about how due protocols, international conventions should be followed in addressing such issues. The activities of the BRICS counter-terrorism working group and its 5 subgroups based upon BRICS counter-terrorism strategy has also been talked about in this declaration. They are also talking about deepening further counter.
Good morning and a warm
warm welcome. You're watching CNN News 18 with me, Atul. Let's begin with the headlines at the top of 9 a.m. At the BRICS summit, Prime Minister Modi calls Pahalgam attack a blow to entire humanity, sends stern message on terror, says condemning terrorism should be our principle, not a matter of convenience. Prime Minister Modi calls for sanctions against terrorists, says there must be absolutely no hesitation in imposing sanctions against terrorists, adds we cannot weigh victims of terrorism and its supporters on the same scale. BRICS backs India, condemns the Pahalgam terror attack in the strongest terms possible and echoes India's position to pursue a zero-tolerance approach towards terrorism and calls for shunning double standards in countering the menace. At BRICS, Prime Minister Modi says Global South is victim of double standards, often receive nothing more than token gestures. As July 9 deadline looms, Trump signs take it or leave it letters to 12 countries, slapping new tariffs of 10% to 70% on their exports to the United States of America. As Trump tariff looms, India draws the red line. Union Minister Piyush Goyal says protecting India's interests is first of the Modi government. Pollution body CAQM may review the Delhi vehicle scrappage order next week. Delhi LG opposes immediate enforcement. CM says the order was always concerning. Death toll in Himachal rises to 74 as heavy monsoon rains cause massive destruction. Rescue ops continue with 31 people still missing. Also with India's thumping victory, which is the first ever in tests at Edgbaston, India crushed England by 337 runs to level the series. And after Elon Musk launches his new party, Trump calls Musk's America party ridiculous, labels former ally a train wreck for political rebellion. Let's begin with our top focus story early this morning as we are learning that after Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the problem on terrorism, emphasizing the recent terror attack in Pahalgam that claimed 26 lives at the 17th BRICS summit. The BRICS nations have issued a joint statement condemning the Pahalgam attack and terrorism, highlighting the need for zero tolerance and rejecting double standards. They've also called for accountability, strict action against terrorists and their supporters, and also push for the adoption of comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism at the United Nations. Prime Minister Modi has also asserted that terrorism is one of humanity's most serious challenges, urging global unity in combating it. The Prime Minister has also gone on to emphasize that any form of support for terrorism for personal or political gain must not be tolerated.
On the session on peace and security, Honorable Prime Minister underlined that terrorism was a grave threat facing humanity. In this context, he noted that all the leaders have condemned Pahalgam terrorist attack. He underlined